Oh, cool.
Okay.
Well, yeah, while we're kind of filling in, I'll go ahead and do an intro.
No, not yet.
Yeah, yeah, this is Space Lab, and we are putting this together in order to allow interactive and immersive artists to talk about their work and also anything having to do with space and technology and just creative exploration of what those concepts mean. We've been fortunate to have really awesome people throughout this year, and we have today WHITEvoid from Berlin, an immersive lighting company that does amazing work in giant warehouses using kinetic lights. And yeah, it's Kola, Corey, and Jonas joining us. And it's pretty late there, I know, and really happy to have you guys out here. And this talk is also donation based. It's always open to donations if you guys want to put some in, but we're actually putting money towards a scholarship for uh, uh, by Black, Indigenous people of color to help them go into more art and technology. And I think Kyle can talk more about that a little bit more. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you guys, WHITEvoid, for coming in. We really appreciate it. Yeah, it's actually, I met Jonas years ago, and he was actually my bridge to a lot of the creative stuff in Berlin because I went to Berlin right after that. And me and him just nerded out about art and technology while I was there. But I met him in Austin. So it's kind of full circle bringing a cool community back. Um, and I want to, yeah, pass it over to you guys, I guess, to give you your presentation. If you want to say anything, go ahead too.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for having us on, and thanks for the lovely introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. And yeah, shall we should we start with introducing ourselves a little bit, I guess,
Yeah,
individually?
go ahead. I don't know you, Corey, but I know I've seen your work at MUTech, or not MUTech, at the Touch Designer Summit in
Oh yeah.
it's at the same time last year in Montreal. And that was really awesome. I think you talked quite a bit about some
Yeah,
awesome.
that was quite fortuitous. We had a project, WhiteVoid had a project going on in Montreal that overlapped with MUTech and also the Touch Design Summit. So we all had a vested interest in being over there already. And being part of the Touch Design Summit was awesome to see how many people are getting into this kind of interactive, creative, real-time art field. It was really inspiring. Um, and the presentation we're going to give today is kind of version 2.0 of that. So apologies to anyone who was there or who watched it on YouTube, but there's some new stuff in here as well.
Sweet. Awesome.
So I guess we start with just a quick introduction of each of us individually. So you introduced us as WhiteVoid. We're not all of WhiteVoid. We're just the software geeks at WhiteVoid. So we're the whole software team. But WHITEvoid is a team of, I've lost track now, but it's somewhere between 30 and 40 permanent staff. And we have a whole team of different talented people who work in all these different areas that come together to make these big, large format installations that we do possible. We certainly couldn't do it with just 3 of us. But we'll go into a bit more detail about the different teams later on in the presentation. But to start with, me, I'm Corey. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I've been living in Berlin now for 4.5 years. I came over here with the express purpose of furthering my career in this exact field, the large, exciting, audiovisual, futuristic, computer cool stuff. And Berlin just felt like the right place to be, to push that forward. And my background is in web development and a bit of music production and recording, DJing, and then VJing, and then the combination of all those things at the same time to do the kind of stuff that we do today. So that's my trajectory.
Colas, you want to get?
Yeah, so I'm Colas. I am from Belgium, and I moved to Berlin 1 year ago for the job at WHITEvoid. And my background is in development for visual effects, for the movie industry.
That's awesome.
Cool. I guess I'll go next. Yeah, and Colas also used like our secret weapon with like 10 years more experience than both Corey and I, or just me. Yeah, so I'm Jonas. I am from Germany originally, but I lived in the States for a long time. And this is also where I met Dawn, because I was in Austin for a year in 2014, 2015. And we met there, and then we kind of moved to Berlin like at the same time. In an unplanned way, but so then we were here and hanging out. And
my
Dom,
background,
actually, it's coming full circle because you were the first person that I knew personally that was doing touch designer stuff, and sort of like got me turned on to that. You know.
Thanks, Dom.
No
Yeah, thank you, man. You kind of got me a job. You know.
Super cool. It's wild to see what people are doing with it, and then it's always like nuts to see what people take with it, because you're already in your own right an awesome musician and visual artist. So
yeah, so my background is kind of more in music and sort of music tech. Also, I used to do a lot of music informatics, like music programming stuff and experimental computer music stuff. But I also always kind of made my own visuals for it, so that's kind of how I pivoted into this kind of stuff. And yeah, and then I started at WHITEvoid last December. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's just a quick intro, and I guess I'm going to share our screen now so that you guys can see our presentation. Let's see. All right.
Cool. Are we live? Can you see the?
yes.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about building large-scale kinetic light installations with Touch Designer. Can I just say?
Yeah.
Oh, need to focus.
No, you can.
Cool. So there's our names again. We've already gone through our background. So WHITEvoid. WHITEvoid is actually kind of 2 companies. There's WHITEvoid and Kinetic Lights. They're 2 arms of the business, and they're both the brainchild of this guy, Christopher Bauder. So he is a German artist who had the vision to do technologically impressive art that connected the virtual world and the real world and made use of space and light as the medium for that. So WHITEvoid, the name from that comes with his tendency for ideas to come out of the void and just start with a sketch on a white page. Everything starts with, you know, a kind of an image or a feeling or an emotion or something that he would like to convey through technology and through the form of installation art. And then Kinetic Lights is the technology company that he had to create to be able to realize that vision. So WHITEvoid is more of the artistic, creative agency side. We do a lot of consulting, and we also do our own art shows where we collaborate with other musicians, other visual artists, and sell tickets and perform for our own audience. But we also do commercial work for brands and corporate events and things like that. People who see the value in the installation art and how it can add to what they're trying to achieve or what they're trying to communicate. And Kinetic Lights is the engineering and development side of the business, or the technology. And that's made up of a team of electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, firmware developers, product designers, industrial designers, integration experts, automation experts, a whole bunch of really smart people that we have the pleasure of working with every day in Berlin. What's next? Cool. So the main bread and butter of our business are these kinetic light installations. So these can be quite simple, and they can, these days, end up being quite complicated. The simplest form really is a grid, an array of individual spheres that we can light up with RGB LEDs. And it's really amazing what you can do with just an array of spheres that you can move up and down in vertical space and change the colors of. The photos you see here, there's two systems. The more dense ones, those are hung from the roof, and they descend down, up and down. And the other ones are balloons with helium inside, but also lights. So they kind of move up and down through the space. This is a photo of a show that we did called Apolog 2048 in China. And I really should remember the name of the amazing director that we worked with, but I'm blanking right now. We'll Google it in a sec. But this one is a huge array of these spheres, and it's combined with projection and an amazing dance performance. Yeah, can we get my little notes up on here? Sorry, this is quite new for us doing
the Zoom presentation.
Google Slides over Zoom.
Oh, you're all good. It's a learning lesson as we do things. So totally cool. And also, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll go over them after the presentation.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're sort of better set up here. No?
Yeah. So I got it wrong. The name of this show is 2047 Apolog.
Not that one was 2028. And that one, no?
No, it's 2047. There's been a few of these ones now. The director's name is Zhang Yimou. So he's a really, really well-respected creative director in China, and we've had the pleasure of collaborating with them 3 years in a row now. This was the first one we did. And we've done a whole bunch of shows over several years, well before any of us joined the company, that used this method, this canvas of working with just rows and columns of spheres, either above a stage or above an audience. But the logical next step is to start connecting two of these winches, these kinetic lights winches, to different things and seeing what kind of possibilities you can have there. So on this slide, we've got a selection of LED rods that are connected on either end to these mechanical winches. And you can do some really cool effects with this, where you have waves kind of running down the length of the installation, or you can interleave them and get like a double helix type look. And these are pretty cool to work with, but you can go even better when you connect three and you get triangles, and then this is where things start to get really interesting, because you can work with the dimensions of the individual elements that make up the whole structure, each in how many degrees? What's the word?
Freedom.
Freedom. 3 degrees of freedom, but more than that.
Not really.
On every axis, you can point them any way you like, and you start to get some really creative possibilities there. Are people interested in seeing more photos of each of these things as we go through, or?
I'm down.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful showcase of the work, and I think oftentimes it's really hard to capture installations. So.
Yeah, I'd be interested as well.
Okay, and I can go into a little bit more detail about each of these things while we go through the photos.
Should I just open it
Yeah,
up?
just open that up.
Yeah, if you want to answer questions while we're going through it, that's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'd be interested as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can go into a little bit more
we
can't really see the chat here, but if you see one that comes through that you think is a zinger,
oh yeah,
send it through and we can answer as we go, and then we can also do an extended Q&A at the end.
Yeah, I think too, to precursor things a little bit, because somebody did ask what programming language do you guys use, and I feel like Touch Designer is kind of an arbitrary, it's an abstraction software, I guess, to it.
Yeah.
But
Touch Designer, I think of it more as a development environment, because it's a visual programming engine. But then you can use several languages inside it. And our software that we use to do these shows extensively uses Python, GLSL, and C++. So later on, we'll go into a little bit more detail about how we use each of those things inside Touch Designer to achieve different parts of the system. So this show is called Grid. This is a collaboration with Robert Henk. He's kind of one of the godfathers of German ambient and techno. He also goes by the alias of Monolake. And he and our founder, Christopher, have become good friends and collaborated on a bunch of shows over the years. And his music is it's perfect accompaniment to the type of visuals that we create. It's very sparse and elegant and beautiful, but then also very brutal at points. And we can really accent that in the visual side of what we do. And this show we did in Zurich. So I had the pleasure of working with Robert there, getting this one together in a very short time frame. I think we had 48 hours after getting things set up, put this show together before the audience came in. And that was actually my first show with WHITEvoid, and it was a bit of a trial by fire. Where is our next?
What's behind that? I can do it. So I'm going to go to the next slide here.
you have all of these are really beautiful in the sake that you have to like look up to, like you're looking up at it, and kind of creates a whole different experience than those things. Like unless you're like in a dome, it's really beautiful for that.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things about the medium is you can watch the same show 5 different times from 5 different perspectives and have a different experience. And also with Robert, there's another dimension on that because he always works in surround. So for this, we had quadraphonic surround sound around the audience area, and also extra effect speakers mounted above the installation. So there were moments where, for example, I think there was a photo earlier where we really blast the smoke machines. Possibly, yeah. And you know, he's really good at creating really making use of the space. And he also kind of gets in there and dubs out the show live. So for this one, we had two performances with two different audiences, and both they were radically different because he kind of was feeling to go a different way with the effects and the way he was jamming it. That was really cool. But we also often for these types of things do a live premiere performance, and then we can run a kind of more relaxed exhibition version where people, like you see in this photo, get the chance to come in, lay down, sit wherever they like, watch the show for as long as they like, and then leave when they've had enough. And that's always it's a different approach to the same show.
That's cool, though. It definitely brings that, like, if you want to go for the live performance, you can engage in it in the live performance aspect.
Yeah, and we'll get into more detail about how that works specifically with Touch Designer a little later on. So let's move on. Lost my notes again.
Here. So what's next?
Oh, cool. Yeah. What's next? So after you've done spheres, rods, triangles, what's next? Lasers. Duh. They're the coolest. So this show is called Deep Web. There's been 2 editions of this. The first one was, I believe, in 2016.
Yeah, I think so.
2016 at Kraftwerk in Berlin. One of these typical amazing Berlin art spaces that we're so lucky to have here. Just a big, beautiful power station that's now kind of like the heart of the arts district in Kreuzberg.
And Dom, did this happen when you were still here? Did you see the first one?
Yeah, I did. This was awesome.
Because I remember, like, I saw it, but I didn't go with you. So I wasn't sure, because I saw it also as an audience member, the very first one.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you got to see it live, and I was like, I gotta go. And yeah, it was beautiful because that ambient mode to it too. It was just, you lay down on the ground and you just look up, and then you move around, you go find another spot. And it does have that difference aspect to it, but the composition and the music was really beautiful because the ending and the beginning tied together so nicely that you don't feel like you have to leave. You can just kind of start seeing how it works.
Yeah, Robert has a real knack for that. He's meticulous about the flow kind of through the phases of the performance, and then it always wraps around perfectly for the ambient exhibition loop that we do. So this was done originally with our predecessor Daniel Del Fovo in charge of the programming. He's a legend, and I had the pleasure of digging up this software from the archive and reviving this project last year in July, and making some improvements, working with some new laser technology, and learning a lot along the way. It was really fun. So in July, the July version, we had over 10,000 visitors for the 4 live show dates that we did with Robert Hank again. He was performing live, and heaps more for the daily exhibition shows. Got a bunch of notes here that are a bit too Touch Designer specific, so I'm going to skip over those.
You're good. There's a question. I think this is definitely one where it's like, for people who haven't seen it, what is the motion aspect to it? And I don't know if you have a video to play.
Oh yeah, let's get into that now. In fact, I've got like a brief collection of kind of behind the scenes photos for this one, so we can kind of start at the top and show how these things come together, and talk a bit about the creative process. Can you guys see the photos now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So this is kind of load in. So we have a team of freelance technicians that we work with from all over Europe, really, really switched on, smart, lovely people. And they've come to be familiar with our technology over the years, and they kind of follow us around the world and do all the hard work that we don't know how to do. So
we're too weak to do.
Yeah. So for this project in Kraftwerk, we had to bring in this motorized truss system. I think these things are called chain hoists. And we build a a frame which is suspended from these chain hoists from the roof, and we mount on the truss our array of winches, and then on the winches we mount an array of our spheres. The spheres themselves for this project don't have RGB LEDs inside them. They're actually filled with water, and the water has the effect of creating a nice stiff tension on the cable because it adds weight, and it also adds a really beautiful ethereal diffuse effect to the sphere when the laser hits the sphere and kind of illuminates the water and illuminates the entire sphere. So these are our guys doing all the cabling. And then after everything's set up and kind of checked, it all gets pulled up into its final position, measured, leveled, all kind of checked for safety and then locked off. And then we'll do a quick line check. So at this point, we've got computer connections going, and we're just testing that everything moves when we ask it to move. You also see there's, we're just starting to fill the room with haze. This is the load-in for the lasers. We used 12 lasers from Solinger Animation, laser animation.
Yeah, laser animation.
Really, really amazing laser company, also based in Berlin. And these lasers are crazy. They're so powerful and honestly kind of scary, but really fun to work with. I think they're 30 watts.
Yeah.
Or is it 40 watts? Is it 10 per channel?
It's 30, I think.
30 watts in total, but they're RGB amber. And trying to get these things working. Ooh, I've gone into some kind of funky slideshow mode here. So after everything's all set up, we've got Premiere, and this is just some kind of Wonderful. There we go. This is just some outdoor photos of, I've lost the ability to skip through now. Cool. So this is shortly before the premiere. The capacity of the venue, I think, is about 2,000 for a live show. And this is just a very smug shot from the top of the stairs before we let the audience in. We're all very excited. And then if you open the next folder here.
Mm-hmm. 1 second.
Cool. So this is what it looks like when it's up and running. And I guess now I'll talk a little bit more about the creative process. So the theme, these shows always have a narrative or a kind of a thread through them of some thematic content. The Christopher and the musician that we're collaborating with kind of workshop together, and there's several scenes and phases that advance the story. And the story for Deep Web is, oh God, I hope I get this right. It's about the interconnected nature of the world and society and all the connections of technology. And it's pretty cool. In some points, it's quite literal. Like the show opens with some kind of static and dial-up modem sounds that Robert's processed in a really cool way with some granular synthesis and some cool effects. And then there's one initial laser, and that's kind of the first connection. And then more lasers start connecting, and then what they're connecting to starts moving, and then it kind of evolves into this beautiful big beast. And when you're in the room, the scale of it really hits you when all these lasers come on and it all starts driving. Have we got a little video here we can show? What's that?
1 second.
We're just going to do very brief videos because there's much higher resolution videos and with nice audio that you can get to at our website or on Vimeo or YouTube. And we don't want to punish you with all of our video content all night long. So that's pretty brief, but hopefully you can get an idea of the motion. So I think there's 170, approximately 170 winches, 170 spheres, 12 lasers. The lasers are placed around on the columns where there's a bottom row and a top row. And within each laser's field of view is about 90 spheres. And there's overlapping zones. So that gives us the ability to sort of trace lines across the viewpoint of each laser to get these effects where we're drawing connections all along the length of the installation. And it's a really, really powerful effect. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's super amazing.
Are there any more questions specific to Deep Web before we go on?
We had a couple. Yeah, we have a few. One of them was where do you guys get the spheres produced at?
Good question. I wish I could answer it for you. I'm not sure. We have a prototyping workshop at our studio in Rummelsburg in Berlin. I didn't pronounce that right, did I?
It was pretty good.
Rummelsburg. And we have some engineers and industrial designers there, and they will kind of prototype these things and then find places that can mass produce them when we need lots of them.
Cool. Berlin's pretty nice for that.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. We're gonna go into like a little bit of a more technical overview of the whole system in a little bit. So maybe we'll like hold that thought. Yeah, and I have the chat open here, but I think we went over that. Then there was Ben asked, what is the typical split between the two teams when it comes to previs, and what technologies do you use? It's kind of a back and forth. So we do have Christopher with the initial ideas, and he has our designers that he works with, but then a lot of it also comes from, what we sort of figure out is possible with Touch Designer, and then like showing it to him and sort of like going back and forth. And then also, a lot of stuff does happen in the final stages of like putting the show together when you're actually in the room and you can see it at full scale. So sometimes even, really significant changes happen then. So it's sort of a circular thing.
Yeah, there's always some happy accidents. For Deep Web in particular, this image that we have on screen right now, this really beautiful mix of like teals and purples and pinks and whites. That's all meant to be white. This is a result of us making a mistake and disabling, I think, a calibration feature in the laser, and realizing that it looked awesome, and then adding that into the story, and that kind of informs how the direction the music goes for that scene. So there's often some kind of organic, cyclic development on the final show in that regard. But yeah, we do try to previs everything. Lukasz is our super talented 3D modeler. He does a lot of mock-ups and previs in Rhinoceros and Grasshopper. and he spends a lot of time making his tools parametric so that we can adapt and quickly respond to new ideas, like changing the amount of these things, the spacing between them, you know, grouping things and moving them into different positions and seeing how that would look. There's another question I see here about music following the installation or the installation following the music. In terms of creative, like the creative direction, it goes both ways. It's an equally collaborative thing. In terms of the system, it's music. The music has more usable information in it for us to match in most cases. So there's, you know, there's the bars and the beats and the transients, audio analysis, all that cool stuff that we can ingest in our system and represent visually. So there's the audio composition kind of drives the visual composition. All right, shall we move on?
Yeah.
So after...
I actually had a related question to that.
Yeah, go for it.
Is the music usually pre-composed, or is there any sort of like generative element or interactive element that you incorporate?
It depends. It depends on how the artist that we're collaborating with likes to work. Robert is a genius. I've never seen someone operate Ableton Live in such an impressive way. I mean, he's one of the founders of the company, so it's kind of to be expected. But he just brings a whole bunch of samples and ideas and some Max for Live devices that he's built for granular synthesis and composition, and he just makes it as like in the room with us. In most cases, there's some ideas that he brings, but it's kind of this real organic process. And he even does it when we're doing a live show, when there's 2,000 people in the room. He's adding more bits in, and like deciding I don't want to do that part now, and just sort of muting this part and deleting that from the arrangement, which is really impressive. For another show that we did, Scala, which I think we're going to present soon after this, we worked with Kunding Ray, and he's an amazing techno producer, DJ, originally from France, but now based in Berlin. And he brought more composed tracks to the first session that we had together, and they're really good. And it led to a really good show. So it goes both ways.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Just to add on to that, you know, like both have sort of like cool elements to them. Like the thing with like the through composed stuff is that you can go really into detail with it, you know, and make things like match perfectly. And so you can like increase the emotional impact of certain effects and stuff like that, because you can really sort of like fine tune it.
Should we show the Scala photos?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the second, technically the third, but the second major edition of this show called Scala, Reflections on Light and Sound. And we did this one in Amsterdam in January.
Yeah.
And it was the first show that we all got to work on together, and it was really fun. So the first show, the original version of this was kind of in offset rows of these mirror discs that gave us a lot more straight lines to work with in the geometry. And the second version, we adapted it to the venue, which is the Gasthouder in Westerpark in Amsterdam, where they do Awakenings Festival. Yeah. And it's such a cool venue. It's like, it's the circular version of Kraftwerk, but even cooler in its own way. And we had 6 channel surround sound for this one in the circle. And David's amazing composition. He added and changed a bunch of things to work better in the space. We had spatial panning where there'd be sounds kind of moving around the center of the room, and we would be following them with lights. And yeah, this show is made up of mirror discs connected to 3 winches each, which means we can change their height and kind of pan and tilt them. And when we track them with moving headlight fixtures, we get these beautiful reflections. And we can create shapes. We can kind of imitate things, like there's a scene, don't know if I have a photo of it.
I don't think there's a photo. So.
We have like, oh, you can kind of see it in this photo. So the light that's shooting up from the what we call a totem there and hitting the mirror directly above it. If you have one of those and you move it up and down and pan it around, it kind of looks like a searchlight, like a UFO or a jellyfish. And we take that idea and add music that matches that theme, and then you get this really beautiful, mesmerizing experience.
Yeah, I actually got to catch that. Yeah, it was amazing.
Oh, you were in Amsterdam?
No, I got to I caught it in Mexico City last year.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, that was Cola and I. Was that your first rodeo? Second rodeo?
Yeah,
Yeah.
First time in China.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool because each song is its own little chapter, and each one has its own little look. And yeah, it's like, it's just seeing how many ways you guys can take these really like simple, I mean, not technically simple, but it's a sharp beam light and a reflective surface with motors, and create so many different looks out of it using like also color. It was so cool.
Yeah, it's and we play up to that aesthetic in the show. It's there's a temptation when you have all this technology. Each of these mirrors has hundreds of pixels in them, and you can do a full pixel map across this whole system and make it like an animated graphic. But it's more impressive to go brutalist and monochrome and elegant and really sharp accents in the space. It just feels like a really good use of the canvas.
Yeah.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the next show called Through the Echoes, and this was at PY1 in Montreal. So this is the show we talked about at the start that was on the same time as MUTEC. And this if Scala's a bit minimalist, this is definitely maximalist. So this show had everything. They've got lasers, they've got our kinetic system, they've got like
projections,
40 gigantic projectors, I think, covering every face of the inside of this pyramid. There was other teams doing kinetic systems and automation. You can see in this photo here, there's a sphere in between these two people standing and looking up. That sphere raises out off the ground and opens up like one of those toys that has all the joints.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy, super impressive. And I've got photos of this. I think we'll show the photos for this one, and then we'll get into the technical stuff for people who are interested. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is epilogue, right?
No, this is yeah.
No.
So that's the venue from the outside. Bloody great big pyramid that they built specifically for the show. Really cool. Also, the MUTEC opening concert was in here, and it was Robert Henk, and it was awesome. Here you can see the projection effect, and up in the peak is where our kinetic systems rest when they're not in use. And this is the effect when they descend. So for this one, we had to, in quite a short time, produce an entirely new product that we called Winch L, because it was large. This one has twice the operating range and 5 times the max speed, I think, of the winches that we used for all the projects that we showed previously. And it's awesome. It's like a whole new dimension of shock when this thing moves up and down above you, because it goes really fast. This is when all of the different teams working on the show were working together, pulling it all together. Pretty cool environments. These are our pixel tubes on winch L. So these are all slightly different lengths, and they've got different pixel count in them, and like a special highlight LED on the bottom, so you can use them to be like a constellation of stars, or you can send rainbows of light up and down each individual rod. And the pixel content for this one, we actually had coming in from notch blocks that we're running inside Disguise media server. So we were driving the motion, and we had another creative team that was doing the visual content for the pixels here. There's another look. And it's actually 2 systems. There's the winch Ls with the pixel tubes, and the ring, the halo that you see around the top, are using our winch Ms, the same ones that we used for Deep Web. And they've got RGB LED spheres in them attached to them. I think that's that one. Any questions for Leos? These are good. Oh, thank you.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, we can also do more questions at the end. Maybe let's just knock out some more slides. Should we skip over the next one?
Yeah, I mean, we've got more photos of more projects, but I'm not sure how we're doing for time. Should we get into the technical stuff?
You guys, I mean, I feel that we're doing pretty all right for time. If you guys want to go over and just keep talking about stuff, but I think maybe wrapping in how the technical, and then circle back about specific projects. Maybe people have specific questions on them.
Yeah, cool. I think that's a good idea. So let's go to the system overview. Yeah. So working from kind of the end result backwards, we'll try to describe how this works. So the installation is a sculpture, a kinetic sculpture that's made up of individual elements. And the elements can be one object hung on one winch, or suspended over 2 winches or 3 winches, or different combinations of shapes that we attach to these things. And more often than not, we have mono LED lights or pixels in these things. And then we have to communicate with the winches to make the system move and light up. So at the communication layer, historically, we've used DMX. The very first versions of this system were created over 10 years ago now for the show called Atom, which used these small prototype handmade machines that Christopher designed and built with some engineer friends that had the helium balloons on, and they moved up and down, and they were only white LEDs. So the show was more restricted than what we've been able to do now. But the communication protocols that were available at the time were standard DMX. More recently, we've been using ArtNet, and instead of having serial DMX cables running up to multiple universes of these winches, we've got ArtNet nodes inside each winch. And that gives you a lot more possibilities for how you set up and monitor the system, as well as sending multiple universes of DMX data to each individual device. And that's how we're able to do the fixtures that have loads of pixels in them. And what we're working on now, and the more recent developments, are getting into more automation industry protocols, because we keep developing bigger and faster and more valuable things and hanging more valuable, scary things on these systems. So there's a real requirement to make sure that they're absolutely safe. And that's a big phase of development for us at the moment. And then the next layer is the control software, which is where we do the majority of our work. And that's made in Touch Designer. It was originally built in V4 for the very early shows. And then WHITEvoid developed a relationship with Derivative, the developers of Touch Designer, and Markus Heckmann, who's one of their original crew, one of the oldest members of their team. He's German, originally from Germany. He came and spent some time and helped us get the first version of the software off the ground in Touch Designer. And then since then, it's gone through several rounds of evolution and iterative development to the piece of software that we're maintaining today. So going deeper into that, you're probably interested about how we use Touch Designer to create the content. And we've got a content engine. We're constantly adding to and changing that based on what the engineering team drops on our desk and says, can you make this thing move in a cool way? Or can you make this thing light up? Or ideas that Christopher has for a new show, or clients that come to us and want to see something new. So that's a piece of the software that's under constant development, and Jonas is actually doing a big rework of that at the moment. Do you want to talk about the way the content works?
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe, yeah, we have this slide here. Yeah, so basically we have this big Touch Designer patch that we call KLC, and that stands for Kinetic Lights Control, because it's our software to control all that stuff. And the one core idea for all of our stuff is that it's all generative content. So one thing that all these shows are sort of based on is that all the stuff's happening in real time. So we don't do video playback. We don't, I mean, you know, things are sort of like planned out and scripted, but everything's happening in real time. And that's one of the core concepts. So both for the motion and also all the light content that you see, it's all generative, it's all algorithmical, and sort of sets itself apart in that way. We have some core concepts though that should be familiar to, you know, anybody that's sort of messed with audio software that's DJ, VJ, that kind of stuff. So at the center of everything is what we call patterns, and that's sort of like the look that you're currently seeing. So
it's kind of analogous to a clip. If you were thinking of a VJ, piece of VJ software like Resolume or something, it's a clip. And I'll stop interrupting you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so that's sort of the nucleus, the core idea is like one look, that's a pattern. And then we work with the concept of decks. So if you're familiar with VJ software, you know, you have like an A deck and a B deck. And so the A deck is what's currently playing, and then B is what you're fading into. That's going to be the next thing, and then you fade back. And then all of those patterns are arranged in a playlist that you can sort of like go sequentially through, or you can jump in between things. And that's all in our own software that we're building. But sometimes for these like really tightly synchronized shows, we need to be a little bit more advanced. And then we rely on some external sequencing software. So often we do things with Ableton and then just send OSC data over network to Touch Designer. And then we can draw like fully detailed like automation curves in Ableton and do things that way. Here's a screenshot of the older version of the software. This is KLC version 2. And this is what has powered a lot of the pictures that you've seen. But as Corey said, we're currently in the middle of a big rewrite of this. And so I just slapped another picture on here. And this is KLC 3. This is what it looks like right now. So on the surface, maybe quite similar in look, but on the back end, it's completely rewritten. And you know, we have some important sort of updates in mind, like making everything run faster, run smoother, optimizing everything, making it easier to share content. Yeah, go ahead.
Just checking what we respect here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The patterns themselves, they have their own parameters, and these parameters can be modulated in real time by various inputs. So in this original version of the software, we had a little pop-up window that gave you a list of OSC channels and MIDI channels that you could drag and drop onto your UI gadgets. And that would be a way that you can get more real-time interactivity into your performance. And we're extending that idea into something a bit more extensive in KLC3. And what else have we missed here? Yeah, wider integration. So the other, to pull off these shows that aren't just contained within our piece of software, where you have a playlist and you're kind of driving the thing in real time, busking like a lighting director would on a lighting console, just choosing what cues to fire and then kind of changing parameters and fading. When we're integrating with a wider system, then we have a whole bunch of subsystems for doing that, for interfacing with timecode, for triggering cues via ArtNet, TCP commands, OSC triggers, all the fun ways that you have for connecting pieces of software for multimedia. We have to support at one time or another, and when we add support to them, we try to do it in a way that means we can use it again for the next show or the next project. And then the final layer on top of this, which is kind of above us, is the creative direction and the narrative of the show, which we talked about a bit earlier. So that's the broad system overview.
Yeah, we can maybe just, so you saw that, maybe just a note on sort of like challenges, stuff that we're dealing with. So one thing that we kind of are keeping in mind a lot is usability of this thing, because, ideally we want the software to also be used by non-developers, because we do have a team of freelancers for sort of like smaller commercial gigs that we do, where in the past we had the old version of the software that we could send them out with and they could do a full show without sort of our support. And we want to get back to that. So make it easy enough to use that somebody that is sort of trained on it, but not a programmer themselves, can do a full show. At the same time, a big problem for us is finding efficient calibration methods, because we're doing more and more complex stuff, and then as soon as, you have like light beams, you have lasers, stuff like that, you need to really calibrate it to get optimal effects. And so that's a big challenge. With that general optimization, making sure that everything runs fast and runs in real time as the software gets bigger and supports more use cases. And then, this thing, new problems require new solutions. We're often, doing things for the first time. And then, touch designer is already sort of like a niche kind of within the broader world of software development, because it's this creative technology, and then the stuff that we're doing is a niche within that niche. So that can be a challenge sometimes, just getting sort of access to the right support and figuring out things.
Yeah, it can be quite daunting being presented with an idea like tracking these objects that are moving quite fast in space at quite a far away distance, and being challenged with, can you track this thing precisely and make the reflection hit what we want it to hit? And we kind of go, sure, we'll figure it out. And so far it's worked out.
Yeah, it looks like it's worked out really great. It's awesome to see, though. It's like there's a lot of these tools that you think outside the box and apply methodologies to, and you come out with some really cool pieces of art and experiences for people. I'm curious though too. It's like the calibration, increasing complex systems as they become more complex and trying to calibrate it. How often does that determine what the content is going to be closer to the actual show? You know.
That's a really good question. I mean, we haven't had a situation yet where we've had to compromise on what we wanted to do in a big way because we couldn't get the technology to work the way that we needed or to be accurate enough, for example. There was the first Scala show in Kraftwerk. There's like 7 or so moving head fixtures in 3 rows down the columns along the length of the installation. And there's 65 mirrors, and it takes up this huge space. And we discovered in our previs, everything looked amazing when we used these additional lights down the back of the venue for tracking. But then when we got in the space, we realized that it didn't feel right. The ones at the far end were too far away, and it made calibrating them was difficult, and they weren't quite as accurate as the others. And we cut those, and the show was better for it. You know, sometimes those kind of things pop up, but in terms of it really affecting the final output, that hasn't happened yet. Touch wood.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That definitely shows that you guys know what you're doing really well. At least like prepare enough to know you can set a parameter to tweak something when you get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's this guy. He's doing all the calibration stuff at the moment, spending a lot of time in the lab improving algorithms and sending us messages on Discord about stuff that we don't understand that apparently sounds like it's made an improvement, and we're always really happy for him.
You know, excuse me, that I've got a question with what you've been talking about there regarding testing of this stuff. You know, it can run the gamut from just putting the system up and seeing how it works versus having test cases where you're able to run a test case and see the output versus expected data, right? Like unit testing, for example, simulations and the real things. Can you talk a bit about your testing of the software?
Sure. Software specifically, we have, so the tools, the application that we build in Touch Designer called KLC is just like the content front end for the most part, but our engineers have more specific tools for validating the hardware developments and changes and firmware changes as well. So they have an entirely more complicated piece of software that's written in a language that I don't know, where they have a lot of command line kind of utilities, and they sometimes I walk in the workshop and there's winches moving and it's running an automated test and collecting data and validating models and making adjustments for how much power to apply to get a constant speed, for example. So there's a lot of that at the hardware specific level. At our level, we have a real-time 3D previs that shows us the output that we expect to get, and we do some signal processing on the data that we're going to send to the real hardware that limits it to be within the capabilities of what we know the hardware can achieve, so that we don't create a show that accelerates and changes direction in ways that the hardware can't actually do. And then we just have to validate it when we get on site and see how it really performs. Does that answer your question? Is that what you meant?
That and yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great.
Cool. So maybe just to mention the last point on the slide here was, yeah, it's also always like this thing of like, we're working on new stuff, but at the same time, our engineers are working on new stuff and the industry moves forward. So it's, you know, it's this question of like always keeping up with, you know, everything new that's coming out, but at the same time, maintaining the old stuff. Ideally, you know, being able to do everything that we used to do and then add new stuff on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another challenge actually, and it's it's a part of software development. Every kind of software development I've ever been involved in, there's always technical debt and legacy support. And that's a real pain point for us sometimes, because there's this system has been evolving over more than 10 years, and there's different generations of the winches that have different firmware on them and different PCBs with different like IO and different mechanical safety features and sensors. And we kind of have to keep on top of that, because sometimes we combine different generations of the hardware into one system, and we just have to deal with that. It's a bit of a tricky one, but with a lot of the new developments from Derivative and Touch Designer 099, there's been a lot of things there that have made our life easier. It's much easier to take a more object-oriented approach, to really break what you're doing down into classes. Touch Design is heading in a direction that makes it even more suited for the work that we're doing, and we're very lucky for that. On the topic of internal developments, I thought we'd just show a little video here of our newest hardware development. We've only done one public show with this so far. These are high definition LED video triangles, video panels that we can move, we can make float. And yeah, high frame rate, 4K resolution spread across a big array of these. And they're really fun to play with.
Here's another one.
These are just internal testing videos. They weren't really meant to see the light of day, but I think this is just a video that we ripped off Vimeo just to see how it looked. And we put like some gentle motion on, but we figured out that even though they're heavy and they're valuable, we can still drive them just as fast as anything else and do anything as intricate as we want. The technology is really quite mature.
Some pixels are dead in a...
Yeah, it opens up a lot of creative possibilities. I believe there's a video of the show that we did in China, a big production with the Apolog directors.
Some pixels are dead in
I will
a...
Google it and put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's on Vimeo. It's on our Vimeo. Cool.
Yeah.
So now that we told you about all of this stuff, just maybe a few points on, since I know not everybody here is a touch designer user or developer, but just some ideas on, why you should use it, to maybe get you guys even more excited. So one thing is that, it's really a perfect tool for connecting anything that you may have laying around to anything else. So it supports all kinds of technologies. Like if you're coming from audio, it supports MIDI, it supports actual audio files, OSC, but then, you can connect lights, you can connect to screens, projectors, you get sensor input. It's really easy and sort of fun to hack things together. It is, I'm putting it in parentheses here, relatively user-friendly. So of course it's not like, like a modern app that's like where everything's like super streamlined and everything, but as programming environments go, it is user-friendly, and there's a lot of support online. Also, you don't need to have any coding experience. It can actually be your gentle first introduction to coding, because it's this visual programming thing. You connect boxes with wires and you can see how the data flows through it. So it really makes sense. And then you can start writing some code, because Python is sort of everywhere integrated with it, but you can start with really small things, just like 2 lines of something that you copied off of like a support article, and then, you're already doing text-based coding. So in that way, I think it's a great first step. At the same time, while it's pretty quick and you can do simple things, it is powerful enough to do complex stuff like what we've shown you. So it can really take you a long way. And lastly, yeah, there's a great, pretty big community of users out there. There's a Discord that's really awesome. There's forums, all kinds of stuff. There's the Touch Designer Summit that was mentioned. Yeah.
And Derivative have really invested a lot of effort recently into, they launched a new website. They've got a whole new user community section where you can have your own profile. It's kind of like a little social network full of audiovisual multimedia geeks and legends that are pushing each other to do cooler and cooler stuff. It's every day I go on there and see something amazing that I want to play with. And they've also really helped with the whole lockdown situation. They put a whole lot of new learning material online. They're doing monthly, I think, live streams where you get to you can send in a patch that you're having problems with or that you're curious about optimizing or something like that. And the in-house developers come on stream and pick it apart with you and show you where you went wrong and what you could do better. All that kind of stuff is amazing. The community support for Touch Designer is just on the up and up. And yeah, I mean,
go learn it.
Yeah,
it's
check
awesome.
it out.
Yeah.
Check it out. And then come and work for us if you want to come and do some really cool stuff.
Click there.
How do I do this?
On the left screen.
Oh God, there we go. Join our team, please. Fingers crossed the event industry comes back, and we always need new talent and people who are excited and want to work on this really cool stuff. So if you're at all interested, shoot us an email and we'll get back to you.
Thanks, you guys. Dude, this is, yeah, I can't agree more with like the Touch Designer, all the points, and also you guys do awesome work, and you guys are trying to send your work throughout the world. Yeah, it's an amazing application to be able to do it, and you guys are amazing for going out there and building these crazy things. I appreciate you guys for coming out, and I don't want to leave out too many questions, but I also don't want to leave you guys, like, I know it's midnight there.
Oh, it's just 11. It's okay.
Okay.
Do we have more beer?
No, I can get more beer. That depends how long the question.
Yeah. Sorry. No, we can do some questions. We'll have the beer after.
All right. Cool. But yeah, we have a few. And first, well, Maria was asking. I'm pretty sure like this Triangles went with the Bon Iver tour. Is that correct?
Almost. Bon Iver was Squares.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I failed at getting any photos of that to show for tonight, but I think it's all over the web, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that was cool. It was the same effect as the Scala show, but instead of the circular mirror discs, we have squares, which pointed at the audience, so they're like diamonds from their perspective, which I guess is why you thought they were triangles. But yeah, that was amazing because that set up on a stage where everything is really pointed in one direction all the time was super powerful. We could do lots of cool stuff.
Yeah. The kinetic lighting systems and stuff, it's really elaborate, but it's also like pretty untouched until, like, I guess you guys have been doing it. The company WHITEvoid has been doing it, but they've been really putting it on the map a lot. Some other questions were for the grids. I guess specifically deep web, or how long does it take to put up a project like that? Is it?
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we're on a time frame of days in general. So I mean,
deep web was really unfortunate for me. It was wedged directly in between two music festivals, and I remember flying back in and basically going straight from the airport to Kraftwerk, being quite tired and knowing that I had 3 days to. I had a budget of 3 days to get all of the lasers working and perfectly, and at that point was when we would do like the content review. And I think we had 2 days for that. And then we had the press opening on the morning of the 6th day or something.
No. But then that's already at the point when the whole thing is hanging and sort of set up. So before that, there's a couple of days of just like technical setup. So I remember for Scala in Amsterdam, it's about a week from like load in to like show opening.
Okay.
And that it varies a little bit, but it's like like 2 days, 3 days of purely technical setup, and then we come in and sort of like do all the like programming and show setup.
Yeah, it depends on the system, the different combinations of elements.
That makes sense. It's like, yeah, you're kind of like the technical and content can't really start until any of those are finished. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one that's kind of open-ended.
Yeah.
So I guess y'all seem like a really interesting case for this kind of general thing I've noticed in kind of art and culture in general, where there's kind of like an economic pressure towards digitally generated content because it's cheaper to produce a lot of different kind of material that way than to actually physically fabricate something. And like in my personal experience, like until recently I worked at Meow Wolf, which was like very physically oriented, like a lot of like welding and woodwork and stuff, versus like a place like Zero Space in New York, where it's like almost entirely based off projections and kind of interaction with performers. And I guess I noticed that's sort of just like a paradigm or a conflict that's sort of settling itself out right now. And I wondered if you all had any thoughts on that.
That's a very good and very open-ended question.
I'm not sure if it's cheaper to do it digitally than to do it physically.
Can you guys hear Cola?
I'm not sure if it's cheaper to do it physically, to do physical thing than to do.
No, he's saying completely digitally is cheaper.
Yeah, I'm really not sure.
You're not sure.
Yeah, that depends what kind of thing you do.
Well, it depends. If you're like Industrial Light and Magic and you're doing visual effects for film, that's exponentially more expensive than the budgets that we have. But it's all about scale. And I think I agree. In most cases, it's just easier to make a 2D render and project it. Like that's
yeah.
Usually there's more established tools for that. You don't have to write firmware and do electronics prototyping before you can even start thinking about the creative part of that. For example, you can just get into Adobe Creative Cloud and make a piece of art. And what I love about this job is it gets me out of the screen and into the real world. Working on this kind of system was what I was daydreaming about when I was living back in Australia, programming websites, because even if it's the coolest website, it's still just a 2D thing that you scroll past mostly.
Yeah, it seems like y'all have a real impressive system in that regard, and that it takes this kind of like digital content creation paradigm, as in like you have a pre-visualization system and you're moving these lights around, but you have this really intense aspect of physicality that I think makes it really impressive, like compared to something that's fully digital.
Yeah, and also just from the work side, it's cool to have access to people that are sort of experts on the hardware side, or that are experts on this whole like the whole production side. Like we don't really know about like how to hang any of these installations in an efficient way, and we have people that know how to really do that well. And it's really cool to have sort of all of that under one roof and have access to that expertise.
Yeah, it's compared to the intense stress that I felt when I was freelancing, doing these much smaller versions of these creative projects before moving to Berlin. I had to wear all the hats, and I'm not really an electrical engineer, but I was like connecting things and not knowing if this was going to be safe. But I've got to do that, and now I've got to write the software for it, and now I've got to. So having such a supportive team is is the best feeling, and they're all really great at what they do.
I saw one thing in the chat, and that was just a quick question about Touch Designer and how it's running on Mac OS. Any tips for optimizing for use on Mac? So I started on Mac with Touch Designer because I just had a Mac. I've come to the conclusion that the whole Mac port of Touch Designer is a marketing campaign to get you into that world, and then you realize you really need a Windows computer. And you switch over. So I think that's ultimately that's the simple answer. Like buy a used gaming laptop, like one that's 3 years old, and it's gonna like run better than your Mac.
Also, it's not really Derivative's fault. There's just so much API stuff that they have to deal with in the macOS environment. Like macOS, Apple have depreciated OpenGL in the two latest macOS operating systems. And that's forced Derivative to do a whole bunch of development to get the Vulkan graphics API working so they can support Metal on the new one, you know, like, and that takes up so much time. And they're a small company, and there's a whole bunch of Windows only things that are really, really good to use that just don't exist on Mac, and they can't, you know, like Microsoft doesn't make Connect drivers and the Connect SDK for macOS. So all of the operators in Touch Designer that give you instant access to like body tracking and all the really cool stuff you can do with a depth camera, you can't do on macOS. And it's not Derivative's fault. It's just the libraries.
And let's see what else is here. We talked about the music pre-composed or also generative.
Did the lasers or sphere movements react to music, or do you deterministically program all motions? Some are completely deterministic, some are generative. For example, in the opening scene of Deep Web, where I said there's one laser and then another connection point and then another, we kind of scripted that so that it was the same every time, because we wanted it to come from here and then here, so people would look where we wanted them to. Later in the show, there's another scene where we're getting a whole bunch of trigger pulses over OSC when there's transients in Robert's techno percussive arrangement, and each of those is triggering a random laser to a random target, or to a random selection of its targets, or advancing an array up and down the installation, for example. So there's stuff that is generative and different every time and constantly changing with live data that's feeding in over the network from Robert's performance. I hope that explained that well.
That was a perfect explanation to what I was asking. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, man. That's a great question. So part of it, I mean, when I say reviving, we wouldn't have had to revive it if we had just kept all the software on the computers and just put them into storage and then pulled them out 5 years later and connected them without running Windows updates. Then it would have been fine. But Touch Designer, because it's really keeping up with the bleeding edge of all these other technologies you can connect with. They're constantly releasing updates, and some of them are API breaking changes or non-backwards compatible changes. So if you open up a project from 1 year ago, that so much has changed that you'll get a whole bunch of warnings about things that you will need to check within your patch to make sure they behave the way that you think they should. But to their credit, Derivative keep a really detailed change log, and there's always alerts for backwards compatibility changes or API changes, and you can step through that and quite easily predict what the problems will be. But in the case of Deep Web, the real killer was that our software moved from Touch Designer 088 to the next major release of Touch Designer 099, because there was 5 years of development there. And I just didn't want to dig through 5-year-old software and fix bugs in it to get it working with the new lasers. Also, no, the real thing there was we collaborated with Derivative to build a new laser chop, a laser channel object inside Touch Designer. Because previously we had to outsource to a subsystem provided by Solinger lasers, where we sent the positions for every beam out via OSC, and calibration and targeting is handled in an external piece of software. For this, we wanted to do it ourselves, and we wanted to do it with the most up-to-date technology. So the lasers now had AVB support, which is audio
video bridge.
Audio video bridge. Thank you, Jonas. Because driving a scanner on a laser is at audio rate. So we had network audio signals basically going directly to the lasers from sending data generated from the laser channel operator within Touch Designer. And the way we solved this in the end was to keep all of the good usable work from the original Deep Web show in the content engine and connect it into our new communications engine in Touch Designer 099 via a shared memory process. So all of our content data gets written into memory and then read out from another Touch Designer instance and sent to the lasers. And at the same time, feedback from the winches is going back the other way to inform the content, because some of the content is driven by reading data back from the system as well, just to make things more complicated.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, we don't really have like a closed answer to it, because one thing is that like we are always sort of dealing with deadlines and getting everything to the point where it can be shown, and then it's like it becomes like not the highest priority. But we do try to keep things in a way that we can archive them in a way. So like all our software development has moved to Git, which is important also just in working as a team. It used to be just one person in the beginning that was doing all the software before we joined, and it's grown since then. So then you have to think of like how to work collaboratively, and Git is really great for that. And so we do have all that history there for the software. There's an added limitation in that Touch Designer projects are binary files, and so they're not really you can store them in Git, but you can't really see like what's inside the file. But we're moving to a lot of external code, and so in that sense it works. But yeah, it's something that we haven't like fully figured out yet. So like some things are like some of the smaller shows are potentially something where you could kind of record it and then like play it back. But then the more complex things that are sort of like happening with real-time input, and tracking and targeting with these lasers and stuff, you need to have the real data coming in live. That's not something that you can record. So it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, there's a good example. There's a project we did somewhere originally before my time, but more recently in China, called Stalactite, and it's one of our rare forays into non-kinetic installations. So it's a whole bunch of LEDs arranged in an inverted pyramid, and it's really beautiful and mesmerizing. And there's a sound composition that goes with it. and it's like an LED, animated LED sculpture. And that one, for example, you can actually manage to record all of that to commercially available hardware, like a multi-channel audio recorder that can be driven by timecode, and a DMX recorder that can be driven by timecode. And you can put that show into a time capsule and pull it out. And if you plug all the cables back into the right spot, you'll get the same thing. Not the same with the fully integrated systems like Jonas was talking about. But on the topic of documentation for people who weren't able to be there to see it, like on the internet, Christopher and I had a really good conversation about this, because I was lamenting that I'm always too busy doing the work and in the space, and by the time it's finished and we've had the premiere and we have the show, I'm sapped. I'm out of energy, and the last thing I want to do is go and get my video gear and get coverage from all the angles and then edit a video together, kind of thing. And I asked him, how do you do it? And he said his professor at art school just drilled it into him that the work doesn't exist until you document it and until people see it. And that's something that I've learned from being here, because I have a whole career of my own experiments and freelance art projects from my time before WHITEvoid. And I've got like a couple of iPhone photos and like a write-up that I put on my website. And it breaks my heart, because they were really, really intense, cool experiences that I'm super proud of. But, 100 people saw it and it's gone. So it's a really poignant question. And everyone who's trying to work in this field and create art should keep in mind that it's important to document and archive.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that, because you're like when you're the tensest moment is during the performance, and you're not about to pull out your phone, take a photo. You're thinking about so many other things. But yeah, I definitely it's beautiful that you guys can document this stuff, and I agree. It's oftentimes really important to take a step back, or call a friend and just like show up with a camera.
Yeah, I noticed here someone said VR might be a good way to archive the 3D experience of these shows. Yes, I agree. And I'm playing around with some stuff in Unreal Engine, but there's a lot to learn. Maybe one day we can do some of this stuff in 3D as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I brought that up because I'm looking for an interesting software challenge to take on myself. And this is really pie in the sky thinking, but if there was a way to actually take the signals of your system in real time and translate that into a VR, almost like a high-res animation, that would be a beautiful thing to be able to have.
Yeah, but you're gonna lose all the physicality that makes the thing a little bit magic also. If it's totally virtual, I don't think you will never get the same effect.
I disagree. I think it's a challenge, and if you're up to it, you should try and put it together.
Yeah,
I want to think about it.
There's definitely there's a group. Let me see. There's another group doing touch designer stuff, like you guys were talking about with the laser shop. I think there's a group in New York that's been using LiDAR sensors to scan the room and then have let people interact with the room. And you can scan a whole room using these LiDARs in real time. And then you can set several ones of them up in the room to scan it, and then also take images and then compile that together. So you have an imprint, like you have a scan of the environment, and you can record all that point cloud data and then replay it in VR if you wanted to. So there's a little bit of a start if you want to challenge. That might be a little lead. And yeah, like if you message one of the Dadageek people, I can send you a link to one of those LiDARs if you want to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, or me.
A group called?
Sorry?
Or what is the group called? That's for Dom. What's the group called?
It's actually Bo Burrows. I worked on a project with him in the past. He's in New York, but he's FutureWise. So he's done some stuff with LiDAR stuff. And I think in a similar way, he helped build a chop that helps do LiDAR stuff. But I have yet to play with it. It's just really cool because like the derivative touch designer group is really, really great at helping you figure out what you want to do. And then if you can kind of figure it out some and they're helping you, they'll make it into something the community can use. And,
yeah.
Really,
yeah, the touch designer, it's just it's a playground for experimenting with ideas and prototyping, pre-visualizing. It's easily the most usable tool I've ever been involved with working with. Just the name Norman on your point, and if anyone has any questions or ideas or things that they want to send through or pitch, anything like that, you can send us an email at software@whitevoid.com.
Is it? Yes.
Same as that, but software instead of jobs.
I'll post it in our group. I'll post both of those in our group so people can look at it later after this video. If does anybody, I guess, have any questions? I don't want to keep you guys up too late. But, yeah, I've enjoyed this. This has been awesome having you. And yeah, it's been really great to have everybody who came out, listen, and ask great questions as well. I guess, yeah, if nobody has any more questions, we'll go ahead and say our goodbyes. And
Nice. Big up, Dom. Big up, Kyle. Thanks so much for having us. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Cool.
yeah, great having you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.